Hi everyone, it's Sharon here, and I thought I would do an update to the video I made about the Great Suffering leading to the Great Awakening, and that 2022 is a choice point year for everybody. So I'm not going to go into a great detail about what that is. Hopefully you have watched the other video and that's why you're interested in the update. And the reason for the update is purely because I've had my choice point. So it's a very personal video this time because I will be explaining the process that I went through. And just to give you an idea, an indication of what it's like if you haven't had your choice point yet. In its basic sort of capsule idea is that everyone in humanity is getting a choice point this year. Choice point is an important choice that we make, and this choice will be it will stem from a suffering and it will lead to an awakening, and that awakening is just up-leveling us to the next level. So it's an opportunity to step away from the great suffering, the suffering being staying as you are with the mindset that you are, with the consciousness that you are, or to making a courageous choice and moving into the Great Awakening, whereby there is a higher level of consciousness. So it doesn't have to be so crazy dramatic. I definitely felt when I did the first video that it would be more dramatic than it was for me, I'm pleased to say. But if you look around the world, it's the end of March 2022. If you look around the world, there is a great deal of suffering. So some suffering is going to be more overt than others. So that's why I wanted to do this video, to explain the process that I went through, and so that those of you may relate to it, especially if you're on the spiritual path as well. You may discover that your choice point isn't as dramatic, and therefore I'm just kind of doing this video so you can kind of see what it might look like for you. Okay, so when I did the video explaining what choice point was, I was told that mine was going to be in January. Now, I have a long history of becoming obsessed if someone gives me a date, and so I really tried not to obsess about this choice point coming in January, because I knew that if I obsess about it, what usually happens is it doesn't happen at that time anyway. So I kind of already knew this about myself, so I tried not to obsess about it. However, what I did intend to do, and what I did do, is I thought about what my suffering may be and how I would feel about it, and could I therefore choose peace? So I knew two factors for me. I knew that my choice was going to be in January, and I knew that my choice would be to choose peace. So I thought. So I decided that the best way, I like to be prepared in life. I like to head things off at the pass. So I decided to just sort of consider what was the worst, what could be my suffering, and how could I choose peace if it was my suffering. So I kind of went through all of this, and I will just say right from the top, it didn't happen in January. In February, I got really close. I didn't realise I was close. And then my guide, Elizabeth, came in and said, "Oh, you're really close." And my mind activated, because it was post meditation. I was journaling. I was writing on a subject, and she came in and she said, "You're really close." And in saying that, my mind switched on and I lost it, and I couldn't for the life of me figure out how to get back to it. And I sort of decided it wasn't the right thing to do, was to try and go back and recreate that same place. So I kind of accepted the fact that I kind of missed it in January. In February, I kind of had come a bit close. But during the course of January and February, I was receiving some really amazing insights, sort of meditation, post-meditation, and I wrote a lot of things in my journal, and my understanding of life really started to blossom in that time. So I was kind of okay with it that it hadn't happened in January. In February, I was close. I didn't know why I was close. Now, in retrospect, I can see exactly why I was close. But what Elizabeth said to me in February made me realise that maybe I wasn't going to have such a dramatic choice point. The reason being, she said it to me while I was sort of contemplating life. I was trying to resolve something, and it occurred to me that if I was close, then maybe the suffering wasn't so visceral, physical, something, an event happening, as much as something I had to resolve. And then in March, I went searching for my choice point. So I'll get to that in a minute. So, in preparation for my choice point, now some of you might think this is a weird thing to do, but this is how I am. So judge me as weird if you like. I decided to go through all the scenarios that I thought I could think of that would make me suffer, and then I would try and see if I could resolve that within myself, and would I be able to choose peace. Now that's hypothetical. When you're in the situation, you won't really know, but I like to prepare myself. So I thought, right, well, if it's any of these things, could I choose peace in them? So the first thing I thought of was, what would happen if my mother passed away? So my dad's already passed away. What would happen if my mother passed away? I think that's quite a logical first stopping point. What would happen if my mother got ill or suddenly passed away? And my parents are, now in this day and age, you wouldn't consider them to be elderly parents, because a lot of people are having children later. But when I was growing up, my parents were considered quite old. And my dad had a heart attack when he was quite relatively young. So my parents have been saying to me since I was 10 years old, don't say this, or don't be like this because I'm going to die. Or don't say this because, or don't be like that because we won't be around forever. And so it sounds like a strange thing to say, but they have prepared me for their passing since I was 10 years old. I'm now 48 going on 49. So, and I have resolved my understanding of what death is, and it doesn't scare me personally. I see it as going home, and if it's my mother's time, I sort of felt like I would be okay. I'd be at peace with that. Keep in mind that everything I'm about to say as a form of preparation, it's not like I would choose it. It's not like I would want it. It's not like I would enjoy it. But I was preparing. So just keep that in mind before anyone judges me for being heartless, right? So I was just sort of talking it through to myself and saying, could I be at peace if my mother passed away suddenly? And none of those things I would choose, but could I be at peace with it was my question to myself. And I decided that I could, because of my understanding of death and because of my understanding of life. And I said to myself, yes, I could do it. If I had to, I could do it. So then I turned to my husband. I thought, what happened if I lost my husband? And obviously that would not be my choice. But I'm preparing. So I went through that because that would be a point of suffering for me. So I sort of looked at it in all lots of different ways. And obviously it wouldn't be a choice, but for the same reasons as my mother, I would be able to come to a place of peace. I'm not saying I would be immediately at peace, but if that's my choice point, I would try and be at peace with it as soon as I could within that choice point time period that I described. And then obviously you'd have to resolve it, and you'd have to take some courageous action around it. And so my courageous action of that would be that I didn't feel like I could stay in my life as it is without my husband. Therefore, I had a plan that I would give up all my worldly possessions and go live in ashram. That was my solution to it. So I said, okay, I could try and be at peace with that. Then I thought there was lots of storms going on at the beginning of the year. What would happen if I lost all my worldly possessions? And I thought, well, I wouldn't choose to lose all my worldly possessions, but if I lost all my worldly possessions, yeah, I'd be all right with it. They're just possessions. I'm not that attached to it. Obviously, I wouldn't want it to happen, but if it were to happen, I'd be all right with that. Sometimes like possessions can feel like a bit of a energetic drain on me as well, so I'm kind of okay to give some of that up. I wouldn't give everything away naturally because, like, you know, there's value in them, but if it happened, I'd be okay with that. And then I sort of said to my husband, and I did say to him, you know, so my choice point I knew was not to leave my husband in any way, but for some people, leaving your partner would be your choice point. And I knew mine wasn't to leave him, but it occurred to me that his choice point might be to leave me. Now, again, this is not what I would choose. But I said to my husband, if this is your choice point, if you get really upset with me, you get really angry with me, you get really disappointed, and the veil lifts and you think you're not meant to be with me, I told him to his face, you need to make that courageous choice and you need to leave me, because the choice point is too important. A jump in consciousness doesn't happen this easily. You don't get this opportunity in most lifetimes. You'll go through many, many lifetimes to go up a consciousness level. If this is your choice point, you have to leave me. Which sounds again like a really weird thing to say to your partner. But this is how strongly I feel about the choice points, was that I can take whatever happens, as long as the people involved will raise up their level of consciousness. That's more important to me than any personal suffering. I can resolve personal suffering. What I can't resolve is somebody choosing, incorrectly choosing a choice point and to stay in suffering, what they think would be a benefit to me. And I wouldn't be able to live with that. So that would actually be a cause of suffering for me. So I'm saying, you know, just take a choice point. If it's, you know, I'll live with the consequences of it, but don't make it on my behalf, right? So I've gone through all of those potential scenarios. And then the last one I had was health. Now, I don't really have any suffering around health because I'm an energy healer. I understand health much more than I ever did. So it doesn't really bother me. So that's why health wasn't really on my list to prepare for. The only thing that I did have was that I sometimes have problems with my eyes, and I don't follow the instructions that the doctors give me on taking eye drops, because obviously I think I know better. And I thought, what happens if I don't know better and I go blind? And so I actually thought to myself, what happens if my choice point is that I go blind and I can't choose peace because I go blind, right? Or I go blind in one eye. And now this might seem like a strange thing, but the reason why it's a cause of suffering, there was a potential cause of suffering, is not that it was to go blind as and of itself. I actually feel like I'd be all right with it. It would be an adaptation, but I'd be okay with it. It was more of a point of suffering, I thought. That's why I identified it, because when I did my vision quest, which is a Native American tradition where you go out by yourself into a field in the middle of nowhere for 3 days and don't eat, and you just have water, and you have a makeshift tent that you make yourself out of natural materials. That's when I discovered that, or that's what created a sense of fear of darkness, pure darkness, which is what I imagine being blind feels like. And it was because it was really dark. There was no natural light anywhere, and at night I woke up, and when I opened my eyes and when I closed my eyes, I couldn't see anything either way, and it really scared my egoic mind. And I know why I resolved it, because I know why it scared my egoic mind, and that's because I'm not that well attached to this life. I'm not as anchored in as maybe some people are. So when it's completely black, and I've had this experience since my 20s, when it's complete, I have complete blackness, like there's no shadow, there's nothing there at all. I don't know who I am. My ego doesn't know what I am, who I am, where I am, and what lifetime I am. and it panics. It really, really panics. And I didn't know this really about myself for much. I knew in the 20s, I woke up for the first time in a hotel that had blackout curtains, and that was the first time I sort of woke up out of bed with a shock and just shouted, "Who am I?" Not where am I, who am I? And I always thought it was quite funny at the time, but afterwards I realised that actually when it's really dark and I've got no anchorage to this life, I'm not always, I wake up and I don't know where I am and who I am. And so that could create a sense of fear. And I've resolved that now, but that's why I went to blindness, in case you're wondering what a weird thing to think of. So obviously choice points are very personal. These are my choice points. I'm sharing with you this process just in case it's helpful to you, and for that reason only. So this is the process that I went through. So those are the things I thought about. I kind of feel like, generally speaking, I'm quite adaptable. Therefore, and I understand that suffering is of the mind. It's not of the physicality or the situation, and that, you know, I understand the principle of, you know, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. I believe that truly, and I've been practicing being okay with discomfort for quite a few years now. And so there's a lot of things I wouldn't choose to be uncomfortable about, but if they happen to me, I think I would be okay with it, because I would adapt to it and I would understand it. I have that solid background now, I feel, that makes me trust that anything that I wouldn't choose personally for my life that comes into my life is there for a reason, and it's there to teach me something, and it's something to grow me. And so rather than resist it, which is usually the form of suffering, I would accept it. So that's the background. That's what I was preparing for. Sorry. So that's what I was preparing for. And so then in February, I had a little bit of an existential crisis. I have them quite often, don't worry about it. Something had upset me greatly. I couldn't resolve it. And so I'd asked the universe, you need to show me this, because I can't get it. And it resolved to a certain extent, but not fully. And now I kind of understand why, because it really was part of my choice point. And that's when Elizabeth came in and said, "You're close." And I couldn't really patch that together in my mind and realize that was the exact subject that was my choice point. I can only see it retrospectively and say that was clearly it. So I got through February, and then I got into beginning of March. And I had seen a quote by Ram Dass, who I love. I'd seen it on Instagram or something. It was like just a quote. And I'd saved it down because I thought, oh, that's piquing some interest in me. But I left it, didn't do anything with it. And then I saw it again, but this time the quote had the second line. So the first time I saw it, it only had one line. The second time it had the second line, and something just went, this is the universe putting this in front of you for a reason. This is an invitation. And I was like, right, I think this is an invitation by the universe saying, go look for your choice point. And I'll tell you what the quote was. So the first part is, suffering only shows you where you are attached. Suffering only shows you where you're attached. So that's the first line I saw, and I thought, this is very interesting. Well, the choice points are all about where our suffering is. So suffering only shows you where you are attached. That's lovely. But it was the second line that got me to take action, which was, suffering only shows you where you are attached. That is why, to those on the path, suffering is grace. That's so lovely. Okay, so suffering only shows you where you are attached, and that's why, to those on the path, suffering is grace. So this, I felt, was an invitation. So I decided to sit down and with my journal and look for my suffering. Now, again, this might seem like weird behaviour to some of you. Why would you go looking for your suffering? But this is what I do all the time, quite frankly. If I have something that still pains me, something that still hurts me, something that keeps coming to my mind, like more times than I would like, to me, I know that needs healing. So I've done a lot of healing, a lot of healing. And, you know, I know a lot of people, I have clients and I have friends even, who say, oh, but I've healed that. I don't know why this has come back again. And I always laugh, because to me, it's like, often this healing process, you don't decide when the healing's done. The universe decides when the healing is done. And often there's just layer upon layer upon layer. So I'm quite used to going, I think, you know, I feel like I've knocked this out of the ballpark. The test if something is healed is you stop thinking about it. It doesn't exist for you anymore. The only reason it comes back is because it's not healed. So I'm quite used to looking for and trying to heal another layer of something. You know, it's not uncommon for me, put it that way. It's very common to go look into the recesses of my subconscious, you know, into the things that pain me. I go looking, I go searching. So this is not an unusual behaviour for me. So I decided to go looking for, you know, with real determination, to go look for the cause of my suffering, because the invitation was that if I look for the suffering, I see where I'm attached, and if I can unattach, then that's the end of my suffering. Simple equation. So, I mean, it took me 10 seconds. All I wrote down was, what am I still attached to? What still causes me suffering? And I knew instantly what causes me suffering, because it's the only few things that come to my mind still. And I know. So if you're wondering how would I know, I can give you quite a quick, easy way of knowing the answer to this question. What do you have conversations in your mind about where no one else is there but you're having an argument? Have you ever had an argument and the person isn't there and nobody started a conversation? Like, I can sometimes be in the shower and I can have an argument with something, and I get so annoyed with myself for doing it, because I realise how silly it is. But it shows that I haven't resolved something because it's still in my mind. So just in the weird, I'm having a shower, I'm having, you know, just getting ready, and suddenly I'll be having a conversation where I'm rehearsing a conversation about something that is unresolved. So something that somebody said that's hurtful, or something, or an experience that something hasn't been resolved. So you're replaying it, your mind is replaying it. And in a way, your mind replays it because it needs to resolve it. Your spirit needs to resolve it. So it's kind of replaying for your own good, but it's quite annoying because it may be something of the past and it hasn't resolved itself. And so you're now in the present and you're replaying it and trying to resolve it, and it's not really working. So I went to, like, I knew what it was. I knew where I suffer from. So I kind of wrote down 3 points, and then I looked at it, and you know, this is the thing about healing, and this is the thing about choice points, and it's quite annoying because you know it. You kind of know it's there anyway. But I felt like I probably have done enough work on this in my life, I thought, for it to not be there. And yet there it was sitting in front of me, and I was like, well, it's quite clearly this. I've got no doubt this is a cause of my suffering, and therefore I have to go and look at it again. So the reason I'm saying this is because, like I said, you know, people do healing work, and they do another bit of healing work, and they do another bit of healing work, and then they go, oh, it should be done by now. You don't get to decide when it's done. The universe knows when it's done. And so if you've got to go again, you've got to go again. And people kind of don't want to go back to it because they go, I've healed it. If it's still there, if you can still feel it, it's not healed. You're still attached and there's still suffering. Then it needs to be you need to keep going with the healing work. And I know it's frustrating. It was frustrating when I saw what I'd written, but that's the whole point, right? If you want to resolve the suffering, you have to keep going with it, right? So anyway, that's the side issue. So I looked at it, and it was quite clear to me that the suffering that I'd written down was that certain people's certain judgments of me still hurt me. It's upset me. And even though I knew that the judgments they made of me were false, they weren't true. And also secondly, like this is on a conscious level, and that also secondly, that if someone judges me, I already know to a certain point, I already knew that it's their judgment. It's got nothing to do with me. It's their judgment. Why should I take it on board? So I knew that on a conscious level, but on a subconscious level, it was still there, right? Because it was still a cause of suffering. So I looked at that, and I kind of went, maybe it's not their judgment of me. Maybe it's my resistance to the judgment of me. So that was my first breakthrough point. And I realized that it wasn't just that they judged me. I kind of accepted to a certain degree that they wanted to judge me, I suppose. But I hadn't really accepted it. I kind of resisted the fact that they wanted to judge me because I thought, it's not true. It's unkind. It's definitely, it's not true. It's unkind. And these people are judging me and I'm feeling quite a lot of pain from it. And I realized that the pain, the suffering, was my resistance to their judgment. So I decided to accept their judgment of me. Now, to be clear, what I mean by that is I decided not to accept the content of their judgment, but I decided to accept their need to judge me. So that sounds a bit weird, but just to clarify what that means is when someone judges you, it's a way to create separation by the egoic mind. It says, you're not me, I'm not you, you're different to me. There's a me, there's a you. You're not conforming to what I need you to be in order for me to be happy. It's very self-serving, obviously it's egoic. So the ego mind wants to judge. It always wants to judge. If you've seen the other video I loaded recently about Will Smith and talk quite a lot about judgment, the egoic mind loves judgment because it creates a sense of separation and it feels more powerful when there's judgment. So when somebody judges you, what they're really saying, what they're not saying, is I need you to be a certain way in order for me to be happy. And I'm going to judge you until you conform to what I believe I need you to be. And so you have to ask the question, well, why does somebody need you to be something different than what you are? And the conclusion I came to basically was that people question their own life choices, and if you don't conform to what they've chosen, they want you to choose what they chose to make themselves feel better. That's the basic nutshell. So I decided that I would just accept that they wanted to judge me to feel better, and I decided to activate compassion within me for that I would not accept the judgment because the judgment was untrue, but I would accept that person or the people who judge me must be in some kind of emotional pain or need me to be something to justify their choices in life. And although I will not justify their choices in life, they're their choices, I'll accept that they want to judge me. So I did this whole process. I just made it up. Just made up the process of accepting judgment. And that was the first stage of my choice point. But I felt like it wasn't enough. So I carried on. And it wasn't enough, so I carried on. And I felt like there was still more suffering. So I felt like those first judgments it was linked. So I carried on. I wanted to carry on because I still felt like my suffering hadn't disappeared. It had improved greatly, but it hadn't disappeared. So then I went down the rabbit hole a bit, and I recognised that part of my suffering that was still, and it was attached to these judgments, was that I limited my own success in life. Define that how you will. I limited my success because I had an unconscious belief, stroke fear, unconscious being the key word there, unconscious belief or fear, and it stemmed from two places. It stemmed from actual experience in friendships, and it stemmed from the judgments that I just worked on. So I'm not going to give you all the details of this. This is all very personal and private, but I will give you as much as I can do to help you understand the process. So I had this unconscious belief around and fears that stemmed partly from experience and partly from people's judgments of me. And I realized that limited my success in life. And so I then had to ask, well, why does it limit? Why am I limited? Why am I limiting my success? And what it came down to was that on an unconscious level, not on a conscious level, on an unconscious level, I believed that some of those judgments of me were true. I was scared that those judgments of me that people made of me were true, and therefore I limited my success so that I felt safe. So this was quite a revelation. I already knew I limited my success. I've been working on this a little bit myself already. So I knew I limited my success, and I knew it was safety based, but I hadn't found the cause of it particularly clearly. And so in February, when I had my existential crisis, you know, these existential crises I have quite often, they resolve themselves really quite quickly. I have a crisis, I kind of ask the universe to help me resolve it, and then I usually resolve it, and then I kind of carry on, and it's hours, if not maximum, a day. And so I can see now that existential crisis was linked to these judgments, and I could see that it was kind of the universe sort of almost directing me into looking at this subject from my choice point. And so I'd been really close in February, but I hadn't gone down the rabbit hole far enough. So, and what that subject was, and I will share this with you, is the existential crisis had been around the idea of why has society insisted that sacrifice is part of love? And I really had a real problem with this. I had such a problem with this in February, so I needed to resolve it. And that was what the subject was about, so I'll give you that much. But it's a very deeply personal point for me. And the idea that sacrifice is a part of love, I couldn't understand it. And I was really struggling with it. So that was the impetus, that was the part of the suffering as well, to understand how has sacrifice become entwined with this concept of love. And it was at that moment when I was resolving that question, but not in my existential crisis, but now in March, is when I sort of started to ask all these questions, and I was sort of recognizing how it was entwined to the judgment. That's when the veil lifted. And I suddenly saw the truth of how love works. And I could see that the suffering that I was experiencing because of the judgments, and the suffering I was experiencing because of the limitation I put on my life, and I was suffering because of the experiences I'd had with friendships, and therefore that interpretation of love, that was all because I misunderstood how love works. I could see the system. There's a really clear, it's a really lovely, beautiful system. But you pick up all these ideas from society about what things are. They're all concepts, and we pass these concepts down to ourselves, and we watch these films, and we have family members and we see other people's lives, and we have these experiences, and we hear these songs, And we think we know what it is, and we've got no bloody clue. Excuse the language. So I suddenly saw the veil lifted, and I saw why I was suffering. And I was suffering because I didn't understand the truth about how love works. And I could suddenly see it. And I'm going to take a step back for 1 second. So after I had my existential crisis, I had been writing, I was in meditation, and I came out of meditation a few days after that, and I heard this question being posed to me post meditation, and it said, if you had to choose between love and peace, what would you choose? Now, because I knew, or I thought I knew, that my choice point was peace, you would think that my answer would be peace. But something in answer to that question inside of me wrote down, I choose love. Because there can be no peace without love. And I wrote that, and I didn't really understand it, but something inside of me wrote that and said, I would choose love because without it, peace can't exist. And it's kind of like, well, peace exists when you know that love is the answer to every question. So it kind of made sense to me, and I understood it to a certain degree, but I didn't really understand it was part of my choice point. I knew it was important, but I didn't know it was part of my choice point. So here I am, and I suddenly see the veil lifts. I see what love really looks like in terms of how it works in the universe. And I kind of see it, and I kind of go, I can see that I've suffered unnecessarily because I didn't understand that this is how it works. And so I said, this is my choice point. I said, I choose love and I choose peace because of it. But actually, without the love, peace wouldn't be able to exist. So I choose love. I choose love now that I can see really, really clearly that I don't need to suffer because of this. And so I chose love and I chose peace. So that was my choice point. And after that, I felt, and I still feel to a certain degree, I felt like I would have all these thoughts in my mind, but nothing could interrupt this peaceful feeling within me. I kind of knew that these words and these thoughts, and, you know, regardless of what it was about, they were just thoughts. It was just like a but they didn't affect my inner core, my inner feeling. It couldn't disturb my inner peace. And I still feel that way. It's probably not as strong because I'm being really practical at the moment, and I'm not sort of contemplating life as much. This was such an amazing experience that I sort of haven't really sat down to sort of contemplate and journal a lot recently because I've been doing lots of practical stuff. But on a general day-to-day level, a lot of the judgments I may have made of other people, let's call it what it is, my husband, just judgments generally, a lot of those have fallen to the wayside because of this understanding of love that I didn't have. And just to give you a very quick glimpse at that, is the recognition that love isn't personal. Love isn't personal. We think it is, and it really isn't. And that's why we suffer. And once you realize that it's not, it changes lots of things for you. And it goes against everything that we've ever been taught in society. And yet it really isn't personal. And it's so beautiful when you realize that it isn't. So it changed a lot for me. It changed my outlook. And it's changed how it means that the judgment that I would have potentially gone to because of my own suffering about the ideas of what love was, or how I received it or didn't receive it, or gave it and didn't give it, those have all changed. It's been undone because I know that's not true anymore. So it's lifted the veil, and now the truth, when my mind wants to go back and say, hey, that person's not acting in a way that I like, that I feel loved, and that's how I would have operated, I now go, oh, that's not how it works. It's fine. Peace. Peace. So, yeah, that's my choice point in a rather long nutshell. But I don't know, so I'm going to just say this as the last piece here. I don't really know why my choice point was so peaceful. I have a working hypothesis. Because if you look around you in the world today, there's a lot of not peace around. And not everyone's choice point is going to be love or peace. Whatever your next level is your choice. So I don't know 100% for fact that this is the case. But my suspicion or my working hypothesis is that some people's choice points are bigger, because maybe I was sort of inching closer to that next level of consciousness anyway. I've been doing a lot of work. I've been inching towards it, and maybe I just needed a little push over the edge. So maybe that's why it was more gentle. Or maybe just at different levels of consciousness, how that choice point shows up is going to be quite different. You know, we're all at very different levels of consciousness. We've all had different amounts of lifetimes. You know, there's young souls, there's old souls. You know, there's people at, you know, much higher levels of consciousness than me. And there's the people who are at lower consciousness levels of anger and stuff. So there'll be different choice points for each level of consciousness. And I guess it depends how close you are to that consciousness level. It might be a factor in it. So it may be, I know that when I first did the first video, I thought it was going to be super dramatic. But I went looking for my choice point. And I don't think most people go looking for their suffering. And I think that's also part of that is, you know, the reason why it's the great suffering leading to the great awakening is, why is the suffering necessary? It's because most people don't change. Most people don't go up a consciousness level without suffering. So that's the reason why the two things are attached. But I went looking for it. Most people try and avoid suffering at all costs. That's quite like human nature, right? Nobody likes suffering. Nobody wants to suffer. So they kind of try and avoid it. Whereas I went looking for it. I feel like I was invited to go looking for it, to be fair. But mine was quite gentle. I'm not going to apologise for that. I'm quite glad it was quite gentle. But I can't say why someone's is more dramatic. You know, some people are experiencing war. There's a lot of people attached to that who's probably got choice points around geopolitics, politics, policy making, charity, compassion, love, you name it. I'm not here to say what everyone's choice points are. There's a huge amount going on in the world right now, not just in Ukraine and Russia. There's a huge amount going on in the world, as there always is a huge amount going on in the world. So I can't say what someone's choice point is going to be. I just wanted to do this video to explain that although initially I thought mine would be quite dramatic, it wasn't as dramatic as I thought it was. But you might look at this video and think, oh, that wasn't much suffering, was it? I've done quite a lot of work to try and resolve the suffering in my life. I really have genuinely tried to resolve it. So I've got what I needed. To me, it feels monumental. To you, you might think that sounds a bit pathetic, but that's for you to judge. It's not for me. So, you know, for me, it was very monumental. For me, it's created quite a big shift in myself and in my understanding and in my life. But others will have more dramatic ones, and I've got no control over that, but that was mine. So, yeah, thank you for watching, and I hope it's been helpful. And best of luck and best wishes for your own choice points this year.